Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, all over the world. I thought we'd start with Tradestops. I have not shown Tradestops in a while. This is showing the overall health allocation of everything that I'm currently invested in, and you can see that I'm like 87% is in the green zone. I have some that are in yellow and a few that are in red. Now I have to admit that silver's been waffling in and out, so when it went yellow, it ended up dropping this thing down to a pretty low percentage of green because I have a pretty good amount of silver. It was just barely yellow, and it didn't want to bother you, but we're back into green when it's up in this $18 range, and so that's good. The only other thing that I remember off the top of my head that's yellow is platinum. In fact, platinum might still be red, come to think about it. Let me go ahead and open that up. Yeah, in the physicals, platinum's still red. It has not even gotten up high enough to where it has turned green. I wanted you to be aware of that, and let's just pick off one of these silver ones. I'll pick one off from 2018. Here we go. All right, so let's drop down to like a year. So you can see that silver is just above the yellow line right now. I'd love to see this thing get back up time to 20 or something, and it will be fine. But to get to red, it'd have to drop all the way down to stop loss 1673 before it would trigger a potential sale. So down here you can see, since it had turned green back in August 30th, it's been intermittently hitting yellow, and then it was yellow for a long time, then it turned green, and then yellow, and then back green again. So we're hitting right on the line here. But you know, if you believe that silver is going to go up significantly, this is still a pretty good entry point. Anyways, like I said, I bought mine a long time ago. In fact, this shows the entry point way back here. So I've got a lot of margin, and we'll just have to see how things work out. I wanted to point out, we're starting to see the deep state now are admitting that, I don't think they're actually admitting they're traders, but they think they're the protector of the country, and that what they're doing is correct, even though they're going way against the Constitution and everything else. But there's a really good article by Tyler again, and it talks about all of the CIA directors. I mean, there was even an admiral the other day that came on and was talking trash about Trump, and it's just unbelievable because they will take away your pension if you do stuff like this. He was a retired guy. So all of this stuff is coming to the head, and this shows you that it is more than a Cold War. This is moving into, I don't know, it's like some of the worst stuff I've ever seen right out in the open for everybody. And I think it's because they know that they are screwed now, and what else they got to lose. So this is another reason why I think this is going to be difficult to try to have an election this next year. It may be postponed, whatever, but you just watch. When all this stuff comes out and people start getting arrested, going to Gitmo and everything, this is going to cause major problems. Think about these snowflakes that couldn't even handle the election. Imagine if their people are now being arrested and taken to Gitmo and potentially executed and everything. This is going to freak them out. So you need to be prepared for this, because it's these liberal bastions that are going to just lose it. I guarantee you. And it's coming. You can see that they're tightening the screws, and I'd be very concerned about this if I was you. All right, every once in a while I like to give you something thought-provoking, and this was a video that talked about the difference between short-term gratification and delayed gratification and how it transformed your life. And I have to admit that I think this is where a lot of people are missing this. And he goes into a pretty good analysis, and this thing's about 12 and a half minutes. I'm probably only going to do the first 5 or 6 minutes, but I want you to listen to what he has to say. This graph is amazing and explains perfectly why you see so many people failing, and they're intentionally failing. They just don't know it. They're intentionally failing because they're only doing things to live for the day and not planning for the future. That's the way I would try to describe it. And so this is a planned failure. So listen to what this has to say, and go from there.
In this video, I'm going to bring you a graph that you've probably never seen before, and it's a graph that's going to give you more value. It's going to help you out in your day-to-day life far more than that other graph. You see, on a day-to-day basis, we make 35,000 decisions, and I believe that it's those decisions that decide whether we have a good life or whether we live a bad life. So you're going to be able to use this graph on every single one of those decisions to first of all highlight which decision is the right decision, and second of all, help you actually make that decision, even if it's difficult or even if it's boring. If you're impatient and you want to know what this graph looks like, then this is what it looks like. Now, it's going to take me a couple minutes to explain what this graph is and why it's so powerful. If you decide to skip ahead, then you're just diminishing the value of this whole video, and there's no point in you watching this video. Seneca once said that we should always allow some time to elapse, for time discloses the truth. So let me unpack this throughout the whole video. We're going to start with some simple concepts, then we're going to move on to the more advanced ones later on. In life, there are activities that give us instant gratification, and there are activities that give us delayed gratification. Instant gratification activities are where we get the benefit of the activity very quickly after doing it. For example, if you post on Instagram, within a couple minutes you're going to start getting likes, which is social approval, which releases dopamine in your brain, and you feel good. You get the benefit very quickly after you do the activity. Other examples of this are eating pizza and watching porn and stuff like that. And delayed gratification, on the other hand, is where you do a task and you don't receive the full amount of benefits from that task until a delayed period of time. For example, if you read a book today, you're not going to receive all of those benefits of the book today. You're going to receive them over a long period of time as you start to apply that book in your life. Other examples are meditation, or learning new skills, or exercising, or eating healthily. Generally speaking, instant gratification feels good in the moment. It feels good as you do it. You get dopamine and it just feels good. But shortly afterwards, around 10 minutes, you can barely remember the fact that you were feeling good before. If you post on Instagram, the initial buzz dies off quite quickly. If you eat a burger, you may enjoy it in the moment, but you're not happier for the rest of the week because you ate that burger. It dies out very quickly. On the other hand, delayed gratification often feels bad in the moment. Eating a salad is less fun than eating a burger, so you feel bad in the moment. Often it's more boring. Often it's slightly more difficult to do. It's harder to read a book than it is to watch a YouTube video. So now we have a graph that looks like this. This shows that when you do instant gratification, you get a peak in your emotions and then it goes back to your baseline. And if you engage in delayed gratifications, let's just say, for this example, you get a negative part of your emotions and then you go back to normal. Now this is where things get interesting, because now we're going to add the element of time into the equation. So let's explore the correlation between instant gratification and the benefits that gives us over time compared to delayed gratification and the benefits that that gives us over time. Generally speaking, instant gratification feels good in the short term, but it's generally net negative in the long run. Eating a burger feels good, but you know over the long run it impacts your health. Cheating on your partner may feel exciting, exhilarating in the moment, but you know in the long run it's definitely net negative. On the other hand, generally speaking, delayed gratification is net positive. If you read a book, it's boring in the moment, but the benefit it gives you over time is immense. If you learn a new skill, it's difficult in the moment, but over the long run, the benefits you get are immense. So we now have a correlation between instant gratification and bad in the long run, and delayed gratification and good in the long run. If you want scientific proof that this is true, you can just Google the marshmallow experiment. I'm not going to go into it now, but that shows scientific proof that the people that are able to engage in delayed gratification end up doing better in their life in the long run in terms of their wealth, their happiness, and their relationships. So now we have a graph that looks like this. The graph shows that with instant gratification it feels good in the moment, then you go back to normal, but over the long run you get a net negative response. And delayed gratification feels boring in the moment, you return back to normal, and over the long run you get a net positive response. But this gets even more interesting when we factor in habits into the equation. You see, when you post on Instagram and you get that dopamine hit, what it does is it creates a loop in your brain between posting on Instagram and feeling good. Which means when you post on Instagram, you're creating a habit in your brain that makes it far more likely that you're going to post on Instagram again. Which means you're going to get into the habit of relying on instant gratification, and it gets even worse. Not only are you going to be relying on the habit of instant gratification through Instagram, when you start seeking instant gratification in one area of your life, it spills out into all areas of your life, which means you're going to start to get impatient. Your attention span is going to start to reduce. You're going to start to switch between partners much more quickly. All of these things are going to happen when you start to seek instant gratification in one area of your life. You become like a dopamine addicted rat that relies on dopamine and instant gratification in all areas of your life. It reduces your ability to do delayed gratification. On the flip side, if you go on a run, you're creating the habit of going on a run, so you're more likely to go on more runs in the future. You're also getting into the habit of practicing delayed gratification, which is going to spill in as a benefit into all other areas of your life. So now we have a graph that looks like this. As you can see, when you do one instant gratification thing, you're far more likely to do other instant gratification things, which is going to make the net negative even lower. Whereas if you do delayed gratification things, you're far more likely to do more delayed gratification things. So it's going to make the net positive far more higher. But this gets even more dramatic when we consider the domino effect. You see, in life, most people make decisions through their first order consequences, which means if I do something, what is the direct consequence of doing that one thing? For example, if I buy a TV on finance, then the first order consequence is that I'm going to have to pay $50 a month for, X amount of period of time. It's not really a big deal. But when you consider the second and the third and the fourth order consequences, which means the chain of reactions that come from that initial event, that singular decision becomes a massive decision. For example, if you don't pay back your payment for that month, your credit goes down, you get more interest, you end up having to pay so much more to the bank. On top of that, not only are you going to end up paying far more than the TV is actually worth over the long run, having a TV in your house is introducing a negative into your environment, which creates a potential for many thousands of hours of distraction away from activities that you want to be doing. So when you consider a TV not just as something in your room that you can watch something with, and not just as the payment plans you're going to have to go with it, you start to realize the net negative effect of buying a TV on finance has. It's absolutely phenomenal, but most people don't think that far into the future. And an example on the flip side, if you go on a run today, then for the rest of the day, you're going to have a clearer mind, which is going to help your relationships because you're going to be less defensive. It's going to help your business or your job because you're going to be able to do better work. And because it's helping your relationship, you're going to be happier when you get home, which means you can relax more, which means you're going to do better in work the next day. You're going to get a promotion and so on and so forth. So when you connect the second and the third and the fourth order consequences of a single activity, you start to recognize the devastating consequences of that activity. If it's a good activity, then you're going to get a whole lot of good from that activity over the long run. And if it's a bad activity, you're going to get a whole lot of bad from that singular activity.
Okay, I thought that was a great video and I wanted you to hear it. I have a very large percentage of male audience, and I want you to think about the fact when you stretch into the future by doing things, like I said, trying to learn something new, it makes a huge difference. I think about things early in my career. I guess I've always been kind of aggressive at learning. This goes back into the early 80s when the desktop computers first came out. Prior to that, we all had these VAX machines, which means we just had a terminal on our desk and a big mainframe somewhere in the building, and those things got overtaxed all the time. It was amazing how you actually had to wait for availability to be able to use it to do simple things. So when the desktops came out, it became your processing power. And I remember they came and dropped one in our office area, and all it had was the operating system, no software, anything, because the IT didn't know anything about this. They just went off, and I mean, those things were like $7,000 at that time. Nice IBM desktops. And I thought, okay, this is the new thing. And I'd already had several years of working on the vaccine. So they had another computer brand out there called Leading Edge, which was a lot less expensive. And I went and bought one for myself, and I brought it home, got it set up. You won't believe this, but like a 300 megabyte hard drive at that time was $300. it was incredible how expensive things were for what little you got. But most of the computers, when you first started, they would have 2 disk drives and no hard drive. So you'd have one disk drive for your application and the other one for your data. So when the hard drives came out, that was a huge improvement. But anyways, eventually I said, this is ridiculous having this power at home. I really need this at work. And so I talked to my boss and said, hey, if I bring this in, will you guys insure it in case somebody, steals it or whatever? And he called up and they said, yeah, no problem. So the funny thing is, we were working on a very difficult problem. And I took all of the information, and I was there really late one night. I entered all this into, I think it was Excel. Even Excel we had back then. Lotus 123 is what initially they were trying to get everybody to use, but I liked Excel better. And I entered all this in, and then I just sorted the data, multiple different ways, and I figured out that the problem was isolated within a very short window of time. And we had these dot matrix printers where the pieces of paper were all attached together, but then you could just separate them using a perforation. But I went ahead and took this string that was about 10 sheets long, and I circled the area where the problem was, and I just hung it on my boss's door, who was long gone by then. So when he came in the morning, he saw that. He immediately took it upstairs to the vice president. He says, oh my God, look at what this guy did, because it was costing us a ton of money. We thought we were going to have to throw away everything that we had built for a couple months, but instead I had isolated it to just like a week's worth of production. And so it was a huge thing. Everybody then said, okay, now we see how this could be extremely valuable. But there's things like that all throughout my career. I think about that, there was some sacrifice that the company actually gave us interest-free loans to buy these things. That's one of the reasons why I went and did it. But I think I was one of the first people to actually show how powerful it would be for people to have computers. And it didn't take long, but after a couple of years, everybody had one on their desk. And so I want you to think about that. There's a lot of time invested in learning how to do these things, and you need to decide if it's something that is that you want to get ahead. You're going to have to invest that time. The companies, and I remember them doing all kinds of training classes at work, but there were people that just decided to retire because they didn't want to learn something new, and I just thought it was the most bizarre thing. Here I am, I'm retired, and I'm still learning new things. I'm constantly buying software like to do this YouTube and figure out how it works. It doesn't bother me. It's just time. How much time do you have? And here, it can completely change your life at work. And that's another reason why, even though I was a non-degreed engineer, I advanced all the way up through the highest ranks, is because I was willing to learn, and then I taught other people. And that's a huge advantage in a company. So I hope everybody's treating you well. I hope you're doing well. Do the best you can. God bless.